Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you once again for joining us today. I'm Jim D'Antona, the President and CEO of the San Luis Obispo Chamber of Commerce. We started this weekly free webinar series at the beginning of the shelter in place to provide our community with the most credible and up-to-date information and resources. As we've been building these webinars, we've been trying to let you know what you can do to get ready and prepare for the reopening. On our webinars, the one thing we've taken away from your questions is that you want to know the specifics of what to do and what to expect. Well, today we aim to focus on the specifics of reopening that is allowed in stage 2 of the Governor's Resilience Roadmap. As of yesterday, our county received clearance to proceed. We've talked a lot about the why and when of reopening. Now we'll focus on the how. I'm not sure we'll be able to answer every question you have, but I'm hopeful when you leave, you will have a lot of information to help your business get going and information you can share with your colleagues to make sure our community reopening is successful, limits your liability, and limits any backslide for our economy. As with all of our webinars, we will allow our presenters to go through their presentations, and then we will take your questions. As a reminder, please use the Q&A button below to submit questions, and I'll bring those questions to our panelists during the question and answer section. Finally, please remember, do not post the questions in the chat panel. We'll be using that to provide you website links for your reference. So on our panel today are 3 members of our county team that are responsible for many of the guidelines that we are talking about today. First, we have Liz Pozzebon, who has more than 25 years of experience and is the Environmental Health Director for the Environmental Health Services Division of the County of San Luis Obispo's Public Health Department. She and her team have assisted in the creation of the county's reopening guidelines. Additionally, we have Lori Salo, is a supervising environmental health specialist with more than 25 years experience, and she coordinates and oversees the food safety program in the Environmental Health Services Division of the County of San Luis Obispo's Public Health Department, and also serves on the county's public health task force that helped create the reopening guidelines. Additionally, we have Ann McDowell, who has been involved with the health field for more than 30 years, with the past 19 years employed as the San Luis Obispo County epidemiologist in the Department of Public Health. Her expertise has been critical during the COVID-19 pandemic and in planning for the county's recovery. Additionally, we are joined by Samantha Welch, who is the Operations Director for Blue Mango Restaurant Groups. You might have heard of a few of those restaurants, Novo, Luna Red, Robbins, and is in charge of their implementation of these guidelines for the businesses in their portfolio. Normally, we'd have our presenters start, but today I want to walk you through some of the important websites and information that the county has put together that will jumpstart our conversation and maybe help you get started on the right foot. So I'll start by getting a screen share in here and take you through how you should approach these guidelines because the resources available are very well done. So if you head over to readyslo.org here, you will find this page that jumps out right for you. And this is one of the key spots, and right there in the first part, we have visited our reopening page. If you click on that, you're going to be brought to a section of the county's website that's going to talk about the reopening process and has a lot of the information available. As you can see, here they've outlined a lot of those details, the orders that are available to you. And if you haven't yet been to this part of the site, I'd recommend immediately starting with this business reopening guidance videos. I'm not going to play for those for you right now. But if you click on them, they have a lot of the great basics to kind of get things rolling. Now to the second piece that are just below it here are the business toolkit and self-certification open. And they've broken down, the county has done a great job of breaking down each of the stages of which all of these folks who can open are available. So all of these break down up and down with all of those departments, your businesses, sectors available, and all of those are expandable. So if you are looking through, these are all the stage 1 sectors that are available to open. And so through the stage 1 piece, here are the list of those folks. Now, we've been into stage 2 for a little while, and so there's curbside retail, supply chains, car washes that have already been open, but we're also getting to now, as of yesterday, 3 new pieces, which I think are obviously kind of the most important. Obviously, we have destination retail, dine-in restaurants, and schools with modifications. What I'd like to kind of jump into here, and one of the ones that I think is kind of the most important, is looking here in the dine-in restaurants, not bars or gaming areas. And by opening this panel, they have some great pieces. And the first one here, guidance for dine-in restaurants, is specifically a piece given by the state and Cal OSHA and a full checklist of all the pieces that kind of go into it with a purpose, and workplace specific plans here. And going through each of these bullets, and it's a very detailed list, but incredibly important because all of these go into what you need to follow for the state guidelines that have been put forward. Again, individual control measures that are in between here, and I think even a little further down here, you got, I mean, again, cleaning and disinfecting protocols, which we've heard so much about. And again, very detailed, a lot of information in here. And so if you click through these, it's going to give you, and by the way, all of these are available in all the different sectors. I'm just going through the dine-in restaurant one, but you can find this in any of those sectors. So you can review that piece, but if you wanted to go into the next piece, the dine-in restaurant reopening checklist, you get a little shorter breakdown that'll help you kind of start to go through of what is required in these pieces. Information about the spread and who is especially vulnerable, understanding all these pieces with a lot of links and direct information that you can use to help build your assessment of your business and how are you going to work through this. Again, a lot of information here, very good detailed information that will help you make sure that when your business is getting up and running and rolling through, that you're meeting the guidelines that are required. Moving on to the next one, which is actually probably one of the most important parts here, is the Ready to Reopen Toolkit and certification form, self-certification form. It's going to take you over to this page. And in here on that top part there, you'll see it says Readiness to Reopen Self-Certification Form. That will now bring you to the actual PDF of what the state is requiring as a self-evaluation and certification for each facility. And as you'll see, right on that in this first piece of category of state requirements and or guidance, it asks you that question if you've performed a detailed risk assessment and implement a site-specific protection plan in accordance with the state guidance documents issued for my business sector. Well, that was everything we just reviewed in those 2 previous documents. And if you check, as you go through all of these, you'll be able to certify that you've done this and done those pieces. But when you're referencing this page and performing a detailed risk assessment, you're going to want to refer to all those previous documents that we were going through that showed the checklist and information to help guide you through this. Don't be waiting for even more specific guidance. These are the documents that are available that can help you do that. Once you get through the self-certification piece of this and you apply your signature and you've got that, the next thing you can go to is the signage. They have signage right on here. In-house, you can print these signs. Fabulous, great for your customers, right? We are open and safe because you've committed to keeping your employees and customers safe. And you can print these right in-house. They also have guidelines on the other side, if you wanted to print them in a commercial version, but it's another great tool, essentially walking you step by step through this process to get you going in the right direction. And so kind of just looking back real quick on going back to the COVID, the individual sectors, sorry, my bad. There is, right here is down at the bottom, so you have the top 4 pieces there with an infographic, I think is the final piece here, the food facility downloadable infographic. That will, it's more info than graphic, but it's great. It is a way of summarizing all of the pieces that are important for you to follow as you're going through this. You know, whether it's about being healthy and clean and disinfecting, using social distance, and then the pickup and delivery piece. All of these are incredibly effective tools in order for us to reopen and know that our community, our employees are safe and that we're moving forward in an effective way. So I wanted to give you all of those points to start off as a general for understanding how we are going to reopen, and as you are looking for specific information, where that information is, and how the county, again, has done a great job of pulling all of this together in order to make the reopening as easy as possible. Obviously, this is a time that we are really, we have to be nimble because all of these rules and guidelines are being created. And as we move through these pieces, we want to make sure that when you open, that you are providing a safe and place for your customers and your employee, because that's good for business, but it's great for protecting yourself from the liability of this. And so what I'd like to do now is, after giving you a little bit about that, is to kind of kick it over to Lori and maybe give us, Salo from the county, maybe tell us a little bit about, from what we saw there, can you maybe give us a little bit more information of how these were created and where do they end up?
There we go. Sure, thank you. I'll endeavor to do the best we can to share as much information as we can in the quickest amount of time. So we worked locally here to create some guidelines when initially I believe we were going to try to run independently of the state. And then we switched to the state's plan. So what we're looking at now is kind of a little bit of a hybrid, but mostly it's the state's recommended guidelines for dine-in restaurants that are going to open during this late phase 2. And the documents that were shown are really, really good sources of information. If you're sort of like me, when I first got the question of, okay, what are we going to ask of our facilities to reopen? What should we do? And I kind of sat there spinning a little bit like, well, geez, how many things can we address? And it kind of put me into I don't know what to write first. So creating these guidelines for you was with the intent to not have you sit like I did and wonder what is the important things to address in my facility. So the dine-in restaurant guidance document, the first one that he showed that is very, very detailed and pretty extensive, corresponds exactly with that dine-in restaurant checklist. So if you're having difficulty on the checklist, understanding exactly what those checkbox items mean, I would recommend going to the dine-in guidance document, because in that document there are much more there's a lot more specific examples of what that specifically means. And for example, I've already had a question about in the first part of the checklist. I had a question about, well, what is a risk assessment? In the guidance document, it kind of identifies some of that for you. But I don't want to jump into the checklist just yet. What I'd kind of like to do is explain to our restaurant operators, in order to open, you have to have 3 things in place. They're pretty simple. The hard part is developing your specific policies and procedures and how you will meet those checklist items in your specific facility. And it's hard for us to give you exact examples because each facility, as we all know, we come in and we do inspections. Each facility is operated differently. You have different sized kitchens, you have different sized dining areas. Your in and outs of your facility are all different. So what we try to do is create some guidelines that you can customize and fit your facility and somehow meeting these requirements. So the first thing you would need to do is review the CDPH, which is the California Department of Public Health, and the OSHA guidelines for dine-in restaurants. They're very helpful. Then you would, from that guidance document, you would start developing your checklist. Just so you know, you don't have to use this checklist. You can create your own, but they do need to hit, thank you for putting that, they do need to hit all of these key components. And just to kind of identify, you review your plan, you create your plan, you create your checklist, you have to post that at your facility, and then you fill out the county's form, the business ready to open self-evaluation form. Those are the three things you need to have in place to open. Those are just the basic start. Now, creating the plan is a little bit harder part. The plan requires several areas to be evaluated and you to develop a protocol of how to meet these specific topics. And I'm going to run through those really quick. The key prevention practices include physical distancing to the maximum extent possible. That's the first category on that checklist. So these exactly, as I mentioned, they exactly correspond to each other. Second is the use of face coverings by employees. Third is the frequent hand washing and regular cleaning and disinfecting of your facilities. And the training of employees on these and the elements of your COVID prevention plan. So first you make the plan, and then you have to teach your employees so that they understand and know what the plan is, and basically what is the expectation of the operator, the owner, the manager, of what their activities would be during that work session. So I don't know if we want to go through the checklist, kind of identified what you have to have done first to open. And just so you know, we do have facilities that have completed these. You don't need to turn them into us, but you have to have had them completed. We do have facilities that have done that and are open. So well, we can, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Lori, I want to thank you for that breakdown. I think it's really helpful to, and you know, as we were talking about restaurants in that example, but as I understand it, all of these rules kind of apply based on the checklist for whether it's retail, or you'll have to provide all of these certifications too. Is that correct?
That's correct. There are checklists for retail operators that are not food establishments, and yes, they have to complete these forms as well. They're all available on the toolkit to be used. Here's the self-certification that you would need to fill out and have on site, showing that you are ready and that you have complied with the requirements to open.
And from that, as I think you just said, and I want to make sure it was clear, we're not turning this back into somewhere. You just have to have it on site and confirmed for that to happen, for your open, correct?
That's correct. There was some confusion that it needed to be submitted to our office, and that is not the case. We would prefer you keep it on site and refer to it with your employees, refine that plan as you determine that maybe your initial idea of something didn't work. That's perfectly understandable. It happens a lot. So this plan is something that is dynamic. We expect you to recognize maybe the excellent choices that you made for your plan, and then we expect you to maybe refine those that aren't working to the best ability that they can. So I guess we can start moving through the checklist and kind of talk about that.
Sure, we'll just pop one of these open here.
Go ahead. You can go back to that real quick. I can talk to a little bit about that document before. On our website, and I believe on the county, on our environmental health website and on our county website, we do have summaries of best management practices during the COVID for retail food service. We have it for swimming pools. We have it for body art. We have it for certified farmers markets. And you'll notice that the top two graphic areas, the top two columns, are pretty much the same. Because all facilities have to make sure that they're cleaning and sanitizing, that they're socially separating within the business. There's several lots of information in those infographics that are common to all businesses. So you see in this retail food one, you have be healthy, be clean, clean and disinfect, social distancing. These would all be very applicable to all businesses. The ones that tend to be a little bit more unique to these are the bottom categories, and they will get much more specific to the actual business. But I would say even businesses that are not pools, foods, certified farmers markets, et cetera, could utilize these in helping them understand what they might need to do in their facility to protect their employees, protect themselves, and to protect their customers. So these are really good. They're part of the checklist. All of these items most likely are a checkbox on the general checklist that you would have to complete. They all pretty much correspond in assisting you in developing the best plan that you can for your specific facility. But I want to kind of jump back to this list and the risk assessment. It was a question I was posed earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it. Normally in a food facility, a risk assessment is about your food preparation, your food storage, your source of your food, your practices within the facility that can create risk if you're not doing it correctly. That's not what we mean here. Under this, it would be your risk to spread the COVID virus throughout your facility and to your customers. So when you do a risk assessment in this capacity, it would be much more associated with where do you have areas that you cannot separate your employee from the customer, like maybe a cash register or a check-in, check-out type situation, where you can't get that distance and that separation between the customer and your employee. That's a risk area, so you would want to address that. If you want to move from outside in the dining area to the kitchen, say you have a cook's line that's very short, very tight, because you have a small kitchen, and you can't get your physical separation in your prep area, in your cook's line. That's a risk area that you want to address. Like, what will you do? Maybe you alternate those shifts. Maybe you bring people in at different times that work in different areas that would cause a congestion in that location. That's kind of what we're looking at in a risk assessment is where are my problem points and what can I do to make it not a safety hazard for my employee and for the customer. So that same example of the cashier, maybe because there's only a 2-foot area right there, maybe you put in a plexiglass shield in front of that cashier so that there is a barrier between the customer and your employee to protect both of them, of course, because you can't get that 6 foot of separation. In areas where you would have separation issues, you obviously would, enlist face coverings, things like that. So that would be kind of in the line of what would be involved in the assessment of the risk for spreading COVID. So of course you create your plan. You part of this is you train your employees on that plan. And here's the part about correcting deficiencies as you move through it. These bullet points, if you address them as part of this form or if you have addressed them independently and separate of this document, these are the things that we want you to address and make sure you have considered. And it's to help you spur ideas. So if there's a category you don't understand, we can go through it hopefully today. If not, I would encourage you to contact either me directly, and I'm always open to answering calls about this. You can contact your inspector. I know a lot of you guys we've been very much in contact with our food facilities. We've contacted, I think, almost every single food facility and had a dialogue with those operators. So you're familiar with your inspector. Our inspectors have been trained on this now. They're familiar with the expectation and the requirements of the plan. And I think between our staff internally and our field staff, we could assist you in a lot of ways. There was also a question earlier about part of the plan requires, what do you do if you have an exposure issue or you have an employee maybe come down with the virus? And when I was reading that checklist part, I had to pause also. So I believe what we would like you to do is contact the public health agency. They will start an investigation, obviously, because now you have a potential sick employee, but they will be your best bet at that point. So if you're at that point in the checklist and you're not sure what to put as your resource or your contact, that would be our local public health department. So those were two questions that I did receive before, but the first category on the checklist is creating your plan. The second category is training your employees on that. You want to teach them about COVID. You want to teach them how they can become exposed to COVID. You want to teach them what the symptoms are to look for. There's a CDC document that's a link here that tells you all the symptoms, and we have added a few symptoms to that list over the time. So you want to make sure you're current on what those symptoms are, train your employees on what they are, have them look for them in themselves and in their coworkers. Obviously, if they're sick with any illness, they shouldn't be working in the facilities, but especially now. Training employees to seek medical attention, proper sanitizing, washing hands, obviously face covering, social distancing. We all seem to be familiar with that. But those are all kind of the topics that we want you to talk to your employees about, making sure that they have a clear understanding of those symptoms. The importance of proper hand washing. There's a soap and water for 20 seconds. You want to prohibit your hand to mouth to nose to face kinds of activities. All of those are key components of the training plan. Then it moves on to individual control measures. You can have your employees screened at your workplace, or you can ask them to screen before they come in. And you want to educate them on what they should be looking for in themselves if you're going to have them do that independently of the facility. So then it goes, there's several control measures here, as you can see. I see we're kind of coming up on time, I'm sorry. Then it goes to more of the cleaning and disinfecting protocol. The EPA has a website that I encourage facilities to go look at. What it does is it describes your product that you use for sanitizing, and it tells you what your product, it identifies your product and how long you need to leave the product on the surface for appropriate sanitizing. And sometimes people don't understand that there's a contact time based on what you're using, and that contact time is different for different sanitizers. But you often want to have your employees clean and sanitize common touch surfaces, and I'm going to try to go faster. Light switches, door knobs, door handles, heavy traffic areas. Those are focused areas that you need to work with. And I see I'm kind of running up, so I'm going to stop for a minute and let Jim.
It's amazing, and it's actually great details that are being provided here. And I think one of the things I'm pulling from all this just kind of is, as if people are used to the idea that the county says my food has to be kept at this exact temperature, at this exact place, that's not what this plan is going to be, because they're asking each business to look at their specific site and talk and do something that's specific to fix their issue, as opposed to just implementing the government's one-size-fits-all approach.
That's correct. Some people will be able to move tables and create an open space. Some people's tables don't move, so you're going to have to barricade. There's an issue of not using bars. People can get very creative. There's been allowances in some cities for restaurants to spill outside of their brick and mortar. So I would check your local jurisdiction to see if that's something that they're going to allow. You can maybe reduce your internal seating to protect your employees and the customers, and maybe expand your outside seating to make up a little bit. We would prefer you not crowd everybody inside your facility. The intent is to reduce the population in your facility by creating space and separation and blocking off some areas to reduce just the volume of people and the volume of touching in the facility. So some jurisdictions have contacted us, and they are willing to allow the businesses to move outside, out onto the sidewalks, out into the parking lots, and outside of those. Check with that, because you can maybe make up in this interim time, you can make up for some of that barricaded and blocked off areas inside your facilities.
Excellent. Well, actually, that's a perfect segue to our other guest, Samantha Welch, and who is the operations director for Blue Mango Restaurant. And so, hearing about all of these things, Samantha, I'd love to hear from you. How are you seeing that you're going to work on implementing that or put that together for your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually saw quite a few questions regarding the risk assessment, so I'll spend a little bit of time diving into that. So I'm going to share my screen here. And what we've been doing is really taking that checklist, which has been incredibly instrumental for us to kind of help us get organized, and have started putting some links to documents that we've been creating to make sure that we're satisfying everything. So what you'll see on your screen is a breakdown of that first section on that checklist, whereas the contents of a written worksite specific plan. So we have started linking documents to make sure, so when we do actually go to print this all out to create the binder to have on site available for inspection and for referral, then we've got all of our I's dotted, or all of our I's dotted and T's crossed. So a risk assessment and the measures that will be taken to prevent the spread of the virus. I'll show you what we've put together to really help in this conversation. And I think, when we started taking not only the size and the scope of trying to apply all of this information into our businesses, but then not only look at trying to apply it to 4 different businesses, and then each of those businesses having very, very differentiated dining spaces that all require something a little bit different. We kind of decided to break it down that way. So I put together a COVID spread risk assessment sheet, and I broke it down. On the bottom you'll see tabs for each of the main sections of our restaurant. So right now this is for Novo restaurant. So if you're looking, we're looking at our bar lounge area, which is the front section of the restaurant. And each of these tabs I broke down by what might be happening in this space that could contribute to the spread of this virus. So this first one is there eating and drinking taking place in this space? Is there, how much time is spent by guests in this space? Is there no time? Is it just pass through? Are they spending fewer than 15 minutes or greater than 15 minutes? The amount of surface area potential for contamination, there's no potential, or there's large and sustained contact with surfaces. Are we preparing food and beverages in this space? How's the ventilation level? Will staff and guests be wearing face coverings? Access to hand washing stations and hand sanitizer, physical distancing score, and then the last one, which of course coming up to Memorial Day weekend we want to be very aware of, is this crowd control score. So what we are doing here is I basically just broke it down. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of our restaurant, but I would definitely urge you to put something like this together, because it caused us to have very specific conversations about how we were going to handle these situations in every single area of our restaurant. I think without this, we would have probably missed a lot of potential cross-contamination or bottlenecks that maybe we wouldn't have seen otherwise. I basically graded each section on a scale of low risk all the way up to high risk. This area of the restaurants, I assigned points to each of the areas. Like for this point, for example, eating or drinking in the space. If there is eating and drinking space, that's 2 points. In this scenario, higher points is not necessarily better. We're going for low scores here. And then if there's no eating or drinking taking place in this space, it would be 0. In this case, in this area, it would only be staff hydration, covered beverages only, no dining. So we went through and did this really for every section of our restaurant. And this is where we get really specific with how we're going to handle crowd control and where we identified areas that we need to place markings on the ground, where we need to maybe bring another employee in to help control the traffic. We identified on our patio that we have this entrance from the back of our restaurant when we really want everyone coming in from the front of the restaurant. So we have to add signage to the back of the restaurant, routing everyone to enter through the Higuera Street entrance. Plus we need to have a person available to communicate with people how best to enter our restaurant to ensure that we don't have people coming in from all different directions and trying to keep one-way traffic as best as we can. So that's what we put together for our risk assessment. I'd be happy to share this template with anybody. It was pretty easy to put together, but shoot us a message and be happy to share this. But it for sure was super helpful for us. So we put that together for all of our restaurants. Moving down the line, the training and communication plan with employees and employee representatives on the plan. We really saw this as an opportunity to start anew. I think before shutdown, we were kind of in a phase where we're looking to retrain our employees, maybe do a culture check-in, see what we can do to lift spirits and kind of get us through the dread of winter when we all slow down. So we had been putting a lot of emphasis on a culture shift in our restaurants. So we decided to take this opportunity to use this as a platform to re-inspire our team, to get everybody onto the same page and really just instill in everyone that this is so important and this is the new normal. This is exactly what we have going on. So we wrote a letter from the owners, just communicating to everybody that this is the new normal, that everything that we used to do before is no longer relevant. Everything that how we open the restaurant, how we close the restaurant, how we operate on a day-to-day basis is no longer relevant. It's new now. And it's really an invitation to our team to have them get on board because it's not really an option, but I think if we invite them to get on board, then it kind of feels a little bit like a choice and they can get excited and take a little bit of ownership in what we're doing. So we're reinvigorating our core values. We're helping them understand what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. Just because we're limiting service doesn't mean we can't do it with a spirit of hospitality. So we wanted to reinforce everything that we believe in as far as taking care of people, but ensure we're doing it in a safe manner. And then all of this will look really familiar to you. This is pretty much everything from that checklist, just tweaked and customized for our restaurants and for our businesses, and how specifically we are going to be taking care of these items. We've also outlined our employee sick policy because this is a different sick policy than what our employees had signed off on when they were originally hired with us. So we've outlined a new sick policy that we are training our staff on. As far as this documentation, we are emailing it to everybody in advance of their first day back to the restaurant. So after we've recalled them, then we email this information, and on their first day, we have a reorientation, we're calling it, where we go through this in detail. We're retraining everybody on all of these protocols, and we're having them sign off on all of this. So if there's any new policy, any change, any updates to what we've done, we're having our staff re-sign an agreement that they understand and that they were informed and they were thoroughly trained on hand washing. They were thoroughly trained on the the signs of COVID and what to do if they feel that they're sick. So we're just making sure that we're really, really doing our due diligence to make sure we're communicating everything clearly. We are implementing a health screening for all of our employees on their way in. Something to note is that health is a privacy issue. So it is, if you do choose to do something like this at your restaurant, then you definitely want to make sure that you're providing a safe and private area to conduct a health screening. We are really simply just checking temperature and having our staff certify that they are not feeling ill. We are outlining what the ban on physical contact is. I don't know what your businesses are, but all of our staff loves each other and gets along really well. So they can't wait to hug each other again. So we've got to be the bad guys to say, sorry, not now. Maybe in a couple months, you guys can go back to high-fiving and hugging, but now it's just not the time. We're also outlining all of our physical distancing measures and crowd prevention. We have a lot of operational changes. So financial management, just really communicating with our staff. We're used to having maybe 300 wines available by the bottle, but that's just not the state that we're in right now. We need to reduce that a bit. And then all of our operational changes, like specific operational changes, are outlines. And then we have some posters in here, just reminders that we'll post for all of our staff on what they need to do at the beginning of their shift, during their shift, and at the end of their shift. And then a sign off at the end. I know I'm running a little short on time. I think a lot of what we're doing is we are, I will open up our sanitation checklist here really quick. So every area of our restaurant where we have conducted a risk assessment, we also have a sanitation checklist. So this is something that we're doing on an hourly basis, and it needs to be signed off by an employee, initialed that it had been completed, and then signed off by the manager will be inspecting that this is complete. So it's definitely not going to be easy reopening, but this is the new world that we're living in. So we might as well jump right in. Are there any questions that we have, Dan or Jim?
Yeah. So what I think we'll do here is, what I would say is actually, as since we're a business organization and supporting businesses, if you guys want to pivot to becoming how to deal with the checklist and do it, that is an amazing resource and tool you guys have put forward. Amazing work here by Blue Mango and looking at each of these pieces and showing our members and the folks here today on what are some of those things we should be looking at. And I love the way, even took it to like as a math guy, that amazing, like, oh, it's a percentage, like we're 70% of the points, we did it wrong, or we were 40, good.
That's my Six Sigma green belt coming out. I need it to be trackable.
Yeah.
And measurable.
And it's awesome. And it's, again, a lot of that was from your reading of that document and then interpreting how it works for your business, right? You weren't given that as some kind of template.
No, it was really trying to understand, and as I was reading through this, it was trying to understand how are we going to accomplish this massive amount of compliance that we need to go through for good reason. But I just had to start breaking it down into small pieces, and the risk assessment, I think, was the last piece that really pulled it all together, and that was what allowed us to have the conversations that we needed in order to truly be ready to open our business.
Fabulous. Well, it's a really great, amazing documents you created there, and thank you for sharing those examples. Okay. Since we have another like 15 minutes, I just want to get to a few of these questions, which, by the way, if you haven't noticed, and I think a lot of you have, our county team has been doing a great job behind the scenes answering questions in writing right in the Q&A section. So hopefully you're seeing all of that getting posted over there. One that's still here and would love to check in with my county folks here and getting some idea is the idea of right now we have dine-in restaurants opening. As we move into different stages, will the rules for dine-in change or spacing, or will this kind of follow all the way through until we're done dealing with COVID? I don't know if that's Lori or Liz who might have a thought on that.
Well, this is Lori, there are obviously phases to it, and the phases are sort of established as to what is included in that phase, but I'm not exactly sure that how that will come out in guidance. We should be, as our curve drops or our illnesses slow down and we don't slide backwards, we should be a little bit of a relaxed atmosphere. It would relax a little bit more as we have less and less of a potential COVID virus issue going around actively. So I would assume that those guidance, as we move into the later phases, we will open up more and more other types of businesses. As you know, you can see the businesses that are part of phase 3, but we would also probably have to modify in the favor of the facility, in this case, dine-in restaurants. We would probably reduce some of those rigid requirements that are there right now, and we would base them on the best practices and the guidance from the state as well. But it might allow tables to come back in and fill in some of those gaps that have been created. Things like that is what I would anticipate, and pretty much getting those employees back into the facility so that they're able to operate at full capacity. And just depending on how the virus and the outbreak and the pandemic is going, would probably determine what we would allow at that time. And Liz, if you have some additional information on phase 3, the projections, I don't know if you have any additional comments on that. You're not unmuted.
Oh, how do you do that?
You got it.
Left corner lower.
Yep. You were on for a second there.
Hello,
I guess I'm going to speak for her. She's having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I would just encourage people to continue to look at readyslo.org. We'll be posting as much information as we can, as currently as we can. And as we move in, the time frame hasn't been determined when we would potentially move to phase 3. As I understand, that's not determined at this time. But we will keep as much information current as we can on that website. So check it frequently, or you can contact our office and we'll gladly, give you the most current information we have.
Great. And kind of looking around that same thing of, dining and events, do you know, it's right in our understanding, stage 2, keeping groups of less than 10 together. Is that, can an event facility operate if it keeps it less than 10, or is that all phase 3, no matter what size? Do you know that answer?
As best I understand, events are not allowed at this time, but you can have gatherings of less than 10 because you have a greater ability to socially separate and, not continue to infect and cause the virus to continue.
Yeah, like it.
But right now, the guidance is 10, no more than 10. I'm assuming as we relax those, that would increase. But I do think that events and things like that are the very last thing that we will be doing.
Okay, so when talking about those groups of less than 10, if you're doing a meeting in your office and you can separate a group of 10, great. It's not talking about events in any way.
Yes.
Correct. Great. Let me kick back to Samantha here, and want to find out where you found some of that. I think you may have just answered it.
I did, yeah, you must have been talking about that question.
Exactly. So there was a question that said, where did you find those, the left column of your checklist? So if you could just maybe read what you wrote.
Yeah, so the left column, can I share my screen again?
Yeah.
So we all talk about the same thing? Okay. Perfect. So I didn't necessarily find them anywhere. It was a lot of interpretation. to be honest, as far as where these came from, based on what we've learned and what the CDC and the county has provided us as how the virus spreads. And so I took that information, interpreted what that looks like in my business. If you were in a retail sector, then maybe it's, picking up a t-shirt and putting it down, or handling items. So you'd want to look at it differently if you were, through the lens of whatever your business is. I looked at it through the lens of a restaurateur.
Right. That's perfect. Yeah, thank you. Looking at, some of the other questions here, and just kind of in general, Lori, and again, talking about not having direct specifics. For instance, you're a retailer with items on your shelves. Is it specific that you're making sure that all of those are covered? Or as you're doing your risk assessment, is that one of those things you might be identifying as a potential touch surface, and how are you going to deal with it? Or is there specific things that say you need to make sure that you cover everything and make sure that the touch does not happen at those places?
Good questions. We have recommended that self-serve items in retail establishments are halted for now because of the common touch. Soda fountains where you touch things continuously, we'd ask that those not be utilized. Let's see, what other self-serve items, like in a 7-Eleven or a AM/PM type setup. We've asked people to frequently, and that's a interesting term, but frequently clean and sanitize in between customers that need to touch surfaces, to microwave their, prepackaged food, et cetera, et cetera. You want to make sure that those establishments go and clean and sanitize those commonly touched surfaces. If it's just, a shelf, I'm not exactly sure what you were talking about originally to have covered. Is that covered literally or covered in the plan?
Oh, good point. Great point. Language is important, obviously, right?
Right.
So what I would say is something that's like a t-shirt or socks or clothes that you have on a shelf, and people may pick those up and may set them back down. Is that something that should be, like, again, you're not going to be able to probably wipe them down, so covering them so they're not touchable, or that you can easily take something off and on, or wipe or something?
I may ask Anne, as an epidemiologist, on a cloth surface, because obviously it's not something smooth and easily cleanable, where you're not going to be using a sanitizer on it. Anne, are you still with us?
I am still with you. I think that yarn is not a very big problem, but something of a hard surface would be of more concern.
Okay, so yeah, anything where you have those, the cloth one is less of a concern. If we have these, if there are retailers or clothing shops and they have stuff on the hanger itself would be something I would assume might be something that needs to be wiped down. The actual cloth, would that be something that'd be less of a problem?
Correct.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. And so just kind of any final, what I did want to go to real quick is if I can have my staff flip over. I think one of the things that the CDC has provided is a great resource for postings or signs where they can show all of these great, that's on the same website, the readyslo.org. And in the Ready to Reopen Toolkit, there is COVID compliant signage that talks about, so you don't even have to go out and try to create your own, how to protect yourself and others, face covering do's and don'ts. And this is, again, back on the county's Ready, they have links to the CDC compliant ready to reopen toolkit here. And so you will have all sorts of ones on how to wash your hands. And I'm so thankful we're getting better at that. That this hopefully is something we remember all the way past COVID. And wow, that's yeah, I forgot how that is. But you make sure to stay attached to these and putting them up and understanding social distancing. And hopefully what we're getting here is the idea that you can put these things up that doesn't create a conflict opportunity between people, whether that's you and a customer or between customers. There's things that people can see right easily that you don't have to kind of go enforce, and hopefully that helps you deal with the issues as they may come up. So again, I think the county has done an amazing job of linking to all of these places that can help you figure out how to get through this and how to make it signed and you know, put together in a way that will make your customers and your employees the most safe possible. I know we're down to our last couple minutes, so I do really want to say thank you to Liz Pozzebon, Lori Salo, Ann McDowell, and Samantha Welch for joining us today. They have been fabulous in giving us examples of how to make this work, and hopefully you've got a lot out of this. For those questions that we didn't get a chance, as always, get a chance to answer, we will do our best to get them answered, and we do a recap tomorrow, and we will try and get as many of those answered as possible so that you can find them in those links that we provide in the recap. As always, this video will be live on our Facebook shortly after this, and then we will, of course, in our email to all the registrants, be able to send back information, a recap of this webinar. We'll be here next Thursday from 2 to 3 trying to give you even more information and adapt to some of the changes that are happening. We really, truly thank you for being here, and we hope, you know, as we all go through this, one of the things we're talking about is a healthy economy requires a healthy community. So the best we can do to keep ourselves safe, to keep limit the liability of your company will be best for all of us. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our guests, and we'll hopefully see you next week.